The fence post splintered under Juliana Zimmerman's hands as she tried once more to hammer it into the hard Colorado earth, her fingers raw and bleeding despite the work gloves she wore, and she knew with a sinking certainty that she could not do this alone. The spring wind of 1867 whipped across the prairie surrounding her small ranch outside Ordway, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and the memory of promises her husband Thomas had made before he rode away with the cavalry unit 3 years ago. He had promised to come back after 6 months. He had promised they would build this place together. He had promised her a life filled with children and laughter and the kind of love that made hard work feel easy. But Thomas Zimmerman had not kept his promises because Thomas Zimmerman was never coming home. The letter had arrived 4 months ago, official and cold, informing her that her husband had fallen during a skirmish with hostile forces near Fort Lyon. No body to bury, no grave to visit, just words on paper that transformed her from a wife into a widow at 23 years old. Juliana had read that letter exactly once before folding it carefully and placing it in the bottom of her trunk beneath the wedding dress she would never wear again. She had not cried. There had been too much work to do for tears. Now she stood in the April sunshine, staring at the broken fence that separated her property from the open range, where cattle from neighboring spreads occasionally wandered through, and trampled what little garden she managed to coax from this stubborn soil. The winter had been brutal, and the cold had weakened the wood, until a small herd of longhorns had pushed right through 2 weeks ago, destroying not just the fence, but also the early vegetables she had planted in desperate hope of having something to sell in town. Juliana wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her arm and looked around the property that had consumed every dollar of their savings and every dream of their future. The small house Thomas had half built still lacked proper shutters on 2 windows. The barn needed repairs to the roof. The well worked, but the bucket had a crack that worsened each day. Everything was falling apart, and she was just one woman with 2 hands and a dwindling supply of determination. She had tried hiring help. The men in town had looked at her with either pity or something worse, and the one hired hand she had managed to bring out to the ranch had spent more time suggesting she sell the place than actually working. He had also made it clear he expected payment in forms other than the few dollars she could scrape together. She had sent him away before noon and resolved to do everything herself, but herself was not enough. The fence proved it. She could not drive posts deep enough into the ground. She could not lift the heavy rails alone. She could not protect what was hers, and the knowledge burned worse than the blisters on her palms. Juliana was contemplating whether she had the energy to try one more post before dark, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from the east. Her hand instinctively went to the rifle she kept propped against the fence, and she wrapped her fingers around the worn stock as she turned to face whoever was coming. Out here, a woman alone could not afford to be trusting. The rider came into view as he crested the small rise that marked the edge of her property. He sat easy in the saddle atop a rangy buckskin horse, and even from a distance she could see he was tall, with broad shoulders and the kind of weathered look that spoke of years spent under the sun. He wore a dark hat pulled low over his eyes, and a bandana around his neck that might once have been red but had faded to the color of rust. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. He was younger than she had first thought, probably not much older than 30, with several days' worth of dark stubble on his jaw and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He reined in his horse about 20 feet from where she stood and touched the brim of his hat in greeting. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice carrying easily across the space between them. "Looks like you are having some trouble with that fence." Juliana kept her hand on the rifle but did not raise it. "I am managing," she said, hearing the defensive edge in her own voice and hating it. "Is there something I can help you with?" The stranger glanced past her at the broken fence line, at the scattered posts and rails, at the hammer lying on the ground where she had dropped it in frustration. When his gaze came back to her face, she saw something in his expression that was neither pity nor hunger but simple understanding. "Name is Cooper Steele," he said. "I have been riding fence for the Rockingham Ranch about 15 miles north of here, but I finished up yesterday and find myself between jobs. Saw your fence from the road and thought you could use a hand." "I cannot pay much," Juliana said automatically, because it was true and because she would not take charity from anyone, stranger or otherwise. Cooper swung down from his horse with the kind of fluid grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. He was indeed tall, well over 6 feet, and built lean and strong like a man who earned his living through hard physical work. "Did not ask for much," he said mildly. "A hot meal and a place to sleep in the barn for a few nights would be payment enough. I have got my own supplies, and I know how to fix a fence proper so it will hold through next winter." Juliana studied him, trying to read the truth in his face. Men did not generally offer help for nothing, but Cooper Steele stood there with his hands loose at his sides and his expression open, waiting for her answer without pressure or presumption. He looked at her like she was a person capable of making her own decisions, not a helpless woman in need of rescue, that more than anything made up her mind. 3 days, she said. "You can fix the fence in 3 days, and I will feed you and you can sleep in the barn. But I keep the rifle close, Mr. Steele, and I know how to use it," something that might have been respect flickered in those creek water eyes. "Fair enough, Mrs." He let the question hang unfinished. "Zimmerman," she said. "Juliana Zimmerman." "Well then, Mrs. Zimmerman, how about you show me what you have got for materials, and I will see what can be done." For the next hour, Juliana watched as Cooper Steele walked the fence line, examining every broken post and rail with careful attention. He did not rush or make grand pronouncements. He simply looked, occasionally crouching down to check how deep the existing posts had been set or running his hands along the wood to test for rot or damage. She found herself studying him in return, noting the way he moved with economy and purpose, the way his hands, scarred and calloused, handled the wood with surprising gentleness. When he returned to where she stood by the barn, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber. "You have got enough wood to do about half the fence," Cooper said without preamble. "The rest is going to need new posts and rails. There is a decent stand of pine about 5 miles west in the foothills. With your permission, I could take a wagon out tomorrow and cut what we need." "That will take more than 3 days," Juliana pointed out. Cooper shrugged. "I have got nowhere particular to be. If you are willing to extend the arrangement, I am willing to see the job done right. A fence that does not hold is not worth building." Juliana found herself nodding before she had consciously decided. "A week then. Maybe 10 days if the work requires it, but the same terms, food and the barn." "Done," Cooper said and held out his hand. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. His palm was rough and warm against hers, and the handshake was firm but brief. "I will get started on what can be done today," he said. "Still got a few hours of good light left. Is there water for my horse?" "Trough by the barn," Juliana said, surprised to find that some of the weight that had been pressing on her chest for months felt lighter. "I will bring you some water and something to eat." She walked back to the house, feeling his eyes on her back, and wondered what kind of man offered to fix a stranger's fence for nothing but food and a place to sleep. In her experience, which admittedly had been limited before Thomas left and had become mostly bitter since. Men did not do things without expecting something in return. But Cooper Steele had looked at her with clear eyes and no hidden agenda, at least none that she could detect. Inside the house, she pumped water into a pitcher and cut several thick slices of the bread she had baked 2 days ago. There was butter, precious and carefully rationed, and some dried beef that she soaked in water to make it less tough. It was not much of a meal, but it was what she had. She arranged everything on a wooden tray Thomas had made during their first winter here, back when they had still been happy and hopeful and young, and carried it outside. Cooper had already begun work on the nearest section of fence. He had stripped off his leather vest and worked in just his shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms roped with muscle. Sweat darkened the fabric between his shoulder blades as he wielded the post-hole digger with steady rhythm, driving it deep into the earth and pulling up scoops of dark soil. He did not stop when she approached, but he called out a thanks when she set the tray down on a flat rock near where he worked. Juliana returned to the house and began preparing a proper supper. She had been rationing her supplies carefully, making 1 chicken stretch for nearly a week, but something made her decide to use more than usual tonight. She stewed the last of the chicken with wild onions she had dug up near the creek and some precious potatoes from the root cellar. She made biscuits, using more of the expensive flour than she normally would. She even opened the jar of preserves she had been saving, thick blackberry jam she had made from berries gathered the previous summer when Thomas was newly gone, and she had still believed in things like planning for the future. By the time the sun had fully set and the prairie had turned from gold to deep purple, Cooper came to the house. He had washed at the pump, his hair still damp and his face clean, though the stubble remained. "Smells good," he said from the doorway, not presuming to enter without invitation. "Come in," Juliana said, ladling stew into 2 bowls. "Sit." They ate in silence at first, both too hungry for conversation. Juliana found herself sneaking glances at her unexpected guest, noting the way he ate with good manners despite his rough appearance, the way he nodded appreciation after the first bite, the way he did not grab or rush but ate like a man who knew the value of a meal. When he had finished the first bowl, she refilled it without asking, and he accepted with a quiet thanks. "You have got a good place here," Cooper said after a while. "Good water, good grazing land. With some work, this could be a fine ranch." "It was supposed to be," Juliana heard herself say. "My husband and I homesteaded here 4 years ago. He had plans. We were going to raise cattle, maybe some horses. He was good with horses." "Was," Cooper repeated softly, catching the past tense. Juliana set down her spoon and met his eyes. "He joined up with the cavalry 3 years ago. There was a bounty for volunteers, and we needed the money. He said it would be 6 months, maybe a year at most. He died at Fort Lyon. I got the letter in December." Cooper was quiet for a long moment. "I am sorry for your loss," he said finally, and the words did not sound empty or automatic. "Losing someone like that, it leaves a hole." "You speak like you know," Juliana said. "Lost my brother in the war," Cooper said. "Confederate side. He believed in it, signed up the first chance he got. Took a bullet at Shiloh in '62. He was 19 years old." He paused, turning his cup in his hands. "After the war ended, there was not much left for me back in Missouri. Father had died while we were fighting, and Mother followed him not 6 months later. So I headed west, figured I would find work with the cattle drives or on ranches. Been moving ever since." "Do you like it?" Juliana asked. "Moving all the time, I mean." Cooper considered the question with the same careful attention he had given the fence. "I thought I did," he said. "It seemed easier than staying still, than putting down roots that could be torn up. But lately, I have been thinking maybe I was just running from something instead of towards something." The honesty in his words struck something deep in Juliana's chest. She understood running. She had been running too, in her own way, running from grief and fear and the awful knowledge that she might not be strong enough to survive out here alone. "Well," she said, attempting lightness, "you have stopped running long enough to fix my fence, and I am grateful for it." Cooper's mouth quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Happy to do it, Mrs. Zimmerman. You have got a good heart to feed a stranger this well." That night, after Cooper had taken his bedroll to the barn and Juliana had cleaned the dishes and banked the fire, she lay in the bed that had once held two and stared at the ceiling. She could hear the wind moving through the grass outside, the familiar creak of the house settling, the distant yip of coyotes hunting under the stars. But she could also hear, faint and oddly comforting, the sound of someone else breathing in the barn. For the first time since Thomas had ridden away, she did not feel completely alone. The next morning dawned clear and cool, the kind of perfect spring day that made the harshness of the prairie seem almost gentle. Juliana rose before the sun, as was her habit, and had coffee boiling and bacon frying by the time Cooper emerged from the barn. He looked rested and ready to work, and they ate a quick breakfast before he hitched up her small wagon and prepared to head into the foothills for timber. "I could come with you," Juliana offered, though part of her dreaded leaving the property unattended. "An extra set of hands might help." Cooper shook his head. "Appreciate it, but this kind of work is what I do. You have got plenty here that needs doing, I imagine. I will be back before dark." He was right, of course. The house needed attention, the garden needed planting, the chickens needed tending. Juliana watched him drive the wagon away, dust rising behind the wheels, and then turned to face her own endless list of tasks. She spent the morning working in what would be the garden once she managed to get it fenced and protected. She turned the soil with a spade, breaking up the clods and pulling rocks that seemed to multiply overnight. The work was hard and monotonous, but there was something meditative about it, something that let her mind wander without dwelling too much on painful things. By midday, her back ached and her hands burned despite the gloves, but she had managed to prepare a section large enough for beans and squash and maybe some corn if the weather held. She was hauling water from the well when she heard riders approaching, and her stomach tightened with instinctive wariness. 3 men rode into the yard, and Juliana recognized them immediately. Bart Henderson owned the Rockingham ranch that Cooper had mentioned, the largest spread in the area. He was a hard man in his 50s with cold eyes and a reputation for taking what he wanted. The 2 men with him were ranch hands she had seen in town, rough types who looked at her in ways that made her want to wash. "Mrs. Zimmerman," Henderson said, tipping his hat but not dismounting. "Heard you had a hired man working your place now." News traveled fast in sparse country. "I've got someone helping with repairs," Juliana said carefully, keeping her distance from the horses. "Temporary arrangement." Henderson glanced around the yard with obvious assessment. "Saw Cooper Steele headed toward the timber this morning. That man works for me until yesterday. Funny he did not mention he would be taking another job so close by." "Mr. Steele told me he had finished his contract with you," Juliana said, hearing the defensive note creep into her voice again. "If there is a problem, you should take it up with him." "No problem," Henderson said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Just wanted to make sure you knew what you were getting into. Steele is a drifter, Mrs. Zimmerman. Here today, gone tomorrow. You cannot count on men like that." "I am not counting on anyone," Juliana said. "He is fixing my fence. That is all." One of the ranch hands snickered, and Henderson shot him a look that killed the sound instantly. "Thing is," Henderson continued, I have been meaning to talk to you about your situation here. A woman alone on a homestead, it is not natural, not safe. I would be willing to make you a fair offer for your land. You could move into town, maybe find work that suits a lady better." Juliana felt anger flare hot in her chest. This was not the first time Henderson had suggested she sell, and she suspected it would not be the last. "This is my home," she said flatly. "Mine and my husband's. I am not selling." "Your husband is dead," Henderson said, not unkindly but without sympathy. "And you are sitting on good grazing land that is going to waste because you cannot work it proper. I am offering you a way out that lets you keep your dignity." I said no. Henderson studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. "Your choice, Mrs. Zimmerman. But this country is hard on folks who cannot pull their weight. You remember that when winter comes, and you are trying to survive another season alone." He touched his hat again and turned his horse. The ranch hands followed, but Juliana saw the way one of them looked back at her, saw the speculation in his eyes, and felt a chill despite the warm sunshine. She stood in the yard long after they had disappeared, her heart pounding and her hands shaking with delayed fear and fury. Men like Henderson thought they owned the world, thought they could push and pressure until people broke. But Juliana had not survived 3 years of waiting and 4 months of widowhood to break now. She had bent, yes, she had nearly folded, but she had not broken. Cooper returned as the sun was beginning to set, the wagon loaded with fresh-cut pine logs that would serve as fence posts. He took one look at Juliana's face and climbed down from the wagon seat. "What happened?" he asked. She told him about Henderson's visit, about the offer and the thinly veiled threats. Cooper's expression grew hard as she spoke, his jaw tightening. "Henderson is a bastard," he said bluntly. "Pardon my language, but it is true. He has been buying up small homesteads for years, usually by making life so difficult for folks that they give up and sell cheap. I should have warned you he might come around." "Why would he care about my little piece of land?" Juliana asked. "He already has thousands of acres." "Water," Cooper said simply. "You have got that good creek running through your property, and it feeds into the main water source for this whole area. Henderson wants to control it all. Plus, some men just do not like seeing a woman succeed where a man failed. Makes them uncomfortable." "My husband did not fail," Juliana said sharply. "I know," Cooper said. "I did not mean it like that, just saying how Henderson probably thinks." He glanced at the house, then back at her. "Look, I will finish this fence good and strong, make it so no cattle wander through accidental or otherwise. That will help. And if Henderson or his boys come around again while I am here, they will have to deal with me too." The protectiveness in his voice surprised her. They had known each other less than 24 hours, and yet Cooper spoke like her problems were his problems. "You do not owe me that," Juliana said. "You are here to build a fence, not fight my battles." "Maybe I am here for both," Cooper said. He held her gaze for a heartbeat longer, then turned back to the wagon. "Help me unload this timber before the light goes completely. Then I will be hungry enough to eat a whole cow if you have got anything for supper." They worked together as the day faded into dusk, carrying the heavy logs from the wagon to stack near the fence line. The work was hard but companionable, and Juliana found herself relaxing into the rhythm of it. When Cooper's hand brushed against hers as they both reached for the same log, she felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with fear or wariness, and everything to do with the sudden realization that he was a man, and she was a woman, and they were alone together in the gathering darkness. She pulled her hand back quickly and focused on the work, but she could feel the heat in her cheeks and wondered if he noticed. If he did, Cooper gave no sign. He simply kept working until the wagon was empty and the logs were stacked neat and ready for the next day's labor. Over the next week, A pattern developed. Cooper worked on the fence from dawn until dusk, pausing only for the midday meal Juliana brought out to him. She worked on her own projects, the garden and the house and the 100 other things that needed doing, but she found her attention drawn again and again to the man working her fence line. She watched the way he moved, efficient and strong. She listened to him talk to his horse, low words of encouragement and affection. She noticed how he always washed before coming to the house for supper, how he never presumed or pushed, how he treated her with a respect that had nothing to do with her being a widow or a woman, but simply with her being another human being trying to make a life in a hard land. They talked during supper, conversations that started awkward and grew easier each night. Cooper told her about his childhood in Missouri, about the farm his family had worked before the war destroyed everything. He told her about the cattle drives he had worked, about the different ranches and towns he had passed through, about the vast loneliness of the western landscape and the strange beauty he had found in it. Juliana found herself sharing things she had not spoken of in years. She told him about growing up in Ohio, about meeting Thomas at a church social when she was 18, about the way he had courted her with wildflowers and promises of adventure. She told him about the journey west, about the hope and terror of claiming their land, about the dreams they had built together in this small house. And slowly, carefully, she told him about the loneliness that had followed Thomas's departure, about the nights she lay awake wondering if she should give up, about the morning she had read that letter and felt something inside her simply shut down. "But you did not give up," Cooper said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. "You are still here." "Some days I do not know why," Juliana admitted. "It would be easier to sell to Henderson, to go back east where my sister lives, to give up on this place." "But you have not," Cooper repeated. "That takes strength, or stubbornness," Juliana said with a wry smile. "Sometimes they are the same thing," Cooper said. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "For what it is worth, I think you should stay. This land, it is part of you now. I can see it in the way you look at it, like you are seeing not just what it is but what it could be. That is rare." Juliana felt something warm unfurl in her chest at his words. "You see a lot for a man who has only been here a week," she said softly. "I see what is there," Cooper said simply. The fence took 12 days to complete. Cooper worked with meticulous care, setting each post deep and true, fitting each rail with precision. When he finally hammered in the last nail and stepped back to survey his work, Juliana stood beside him and felt a surge of gratitude so strong it nearly brought tears to her eyes. "It is perfect," she said, "strong enough to hold against anything." "It will last years if you treat it right," Cooper said. "And if you ever need repairs, I left extra posts and rails in the barn." The "if you ever need repairs" hung in the air between them, a reminder that Cooper's work here was finished, that he would be moving on as drifters did, that this temporary arrangement had reached its natural conclusion. Juliana had known this moment was coming, had prepared herself for it, but standing there in the afternoon sunshine with this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to speak, she found she was not ready to say goodbye. "You could stay," she heard herself say. "I mean, there is other work that needs doing, the barn roof, the shutters, a dozen other things. I still cannot pay much, but the arrangement we have, it could continue." Cooper turned to look at her, his creek water eyes searching her face. "Mrs. Zimmerman," he began, and she interrupted him. "Juliana," she said, "please. We have been eating supper together for nearly 2 weeks. I think we can use first names." "Juliana," Cooper said, and the way he said her name, careful and warm, made something flutter in her stomach. "I would like nothing more than to stay, but I need you to understand something. I am not staying just because there is work. I am staying because I want to be here. Because in the time I have been fixing your fence, I have found something I did not expect to find." "What is that?" Juliana asked, though her heart was beating so hard she thought he must surely hear it. "A reason to stop running," Cooper said. "A reason to stay still long enough to see what might grow if I give it time." He took a breath, and she saw the vulnerability in his expression. "I am saying this poorly, but what I mean is that I care about you. I care about what happens to you in this place. And if you will have me, I would like to stay not as hired help but as something more. As a partner, maybe. As someone who stands beside you instead of just working for you." Juliana felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "I thought I was done with this," she said. "With feeling things for someone, with trusting someone with my heart. When Thomas died, I thought that part of me died too. But it did not," Cooper said gently. "You are still here, Juliana. Still hoping, still fighting, still alive. And I am not Thomas. I cannot replace him, and I would not try. But I can offer you myself, all that I am, which is just a cowboy with some skill and a lot of hope and a heart that started beating different the first moment. I saw you standing there with your hand on that rifle." Juliana laughed, a sound that was half sob, and reached out to take his hand. "I want you to stay," she said. "Not just for the work, though God knows there is plenty, but because when you are here, I do not feel alone. Because you make me remember that I am more than just a widow holding on by my fingernails. Because you see me, Cooper, really see me. And that is something I have not had in a very long time." Cooper squeezed her hand, his rough palm warm against hers. "Then I will stay," he said, "as long as you will have me." They stood there by the finished fence as the sun moved across the sky, not speaking, just holding hands and breathing in the same air, and beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from the broken pieces they had both been carrying. That night at supper, the air between them felt different, charged with possibility and promise. They talked easily, finishing each other's sentences and sharing smiles that lingered longer than necessary. When Cooper stood to leave for the barn, Juliana surprised herself by standing with him and walking him to the door. "Thank you," she said. "For the fence, for staying, for everything." Cooper looked down at her, and she saw desire flicker in his eyes, but also patience and respect. "Thank you for giving me a reason," he said. Then, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "Good night, Juliana." "Good night, Cooper," she whispered, and watched him walk across the yard to the barn, her heart full in a way it had not been in years. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm. Cooper worked on the various repairs the property needed, but now he worked with the air of someone building something permanent rather than just fixing something temporary. He replaced the shutters on the windows, crafted them from sturdy pine, and hung them with careful precision. He repaired the barn roof, spending 2 full days in the sun hammering new shingles into place. He fixed the cracked bucket and reinforced the chicken coop and built a gate for the garden that swung smooth and true. Juliana worked beside him when she could, learning skills she had never had the chance to learn when Thomas was alive. Cooper taught her how to set a hinge properly, how to cut wood at the right angle for a tight joint, how to judge the quality of timber by its weight and grain. He was a patient teacher, never condescending or impatient when she made mistakes, always encouraging when she got something right. They also worked on the garden together, planting rows of beans and squash and corn, setting stakes for tomatoes, marking out space for potatoes. Cooper had a surprising knowledge of growing things for a man who spent most of his life on horseback, and he shared what he knew freely. "My mother had a garden," he told Juliana as they worked side by side in the rich earth. "She could grow anything, even in Missouri clay. I used to help her when I was young before everything went to hell. She would be proud of you, Juliana said, patting down soil around a seedling. Seeing how you carry that knowledge forward. I hope so, Cooper said quietly. I hope both my parents would be proud of the man I am trying to become. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and talked until the stars came out. Sometimes, Cooper played a harmonica he kept in his saddlebag, simple melodies that drifted across the prairie like prayers. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, listening to the wind and the coyotes and the soft sounds of the land settling into night. And sometimes, when the moment felt right, Cooper would reach over and take Juliana's hand, and they would sit there connected by that simple touch, feeling the rightness of it sink into their bones. 3 weeks after Cooper had first arrived, Juliana woke to find dark clouds gathering on the western horizon. By mid-morning, the wind had picked up, carrying the smell of rain and the promise of a spring storm. Cooper secured the animals and made sure everything that could blow away was tied down or stored, working with the kind of focused urgency that came from years of reading weather. The storm hit just after noon, a wall of wind and rain that turned the world gray and made the house shake on its foundation. Juliana stood at the window watching lightning split the sky, watching rain pour down in sheets so thick she could barely see the barn. She worried about Cooper out there alone, worried that the wind might damage the roof he had just repaired, worried in the way you worry about someone who has become essential to your happiness. But when the worst of the storm had passed and the rain had settled into a steady drizzle, she saw Cooper emerge from the barn, soaked but whole. He ran across the yard and burst through the door, water streaming from his hat and clothes, and without thinking, Juliana threw her arms around him. "I was worried," she said against his wet shirt. "I thought something might have happened." Cooper's arms came around her, holding her close despite the water soaking into her dress. "I am fine," he said. "The barn held strong. Everything is fine." Juliana pulled back just enough to look up at him, and whatever he saw in her face made his expression shift into something intense and hungry. "Juliana," he said, her name a question and a prayer. She answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question being asked and answered. But then Cooper's hand came up to cup the back of her head, and Juliana's fingers curled into his wet shirt, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and needful. They broke apart gasping, staring at each other with wide eyes. "I should not have done that," Cooper said, but he did not release her. "You are still in mourning. People will talk if they know." "I do not care what people say," Juliana said fiercely. "I have been alone for 3 years, Cooper. 3 years of waiting and hoping and then grieving. I am done with being alone. I am done with living half a life because that is what is expected." She took a shaking breath. "I loved my husband. I will always carry him in my heart. But he is gone, and I am still here, and I have feelings for you that I cannot ignore anymore." Cooper searched her face, and whatever he found there satisfied him because he pulled her close again and kissed her properly this time, thorough and deep and filled with weeks of restrained longing. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard, and Juliana felt like every nerve in her body was singing. "I love you," Cooper said, the words simple and true. "I think I started loving you the moment I saw you standing there with your bleeding hands and your stubborn pride, refusing to admit you needed help. I love your strength and your courage and the way you see beauty in this hard land. I love the way you talk about your dreams like they are real things you can touch. I love you, Juliana, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it." Juliana felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "I love you too," she said. I did not think I could feel this way again, but I do. I love you, Cooper Steele, and I want you to stay forever." "Then I will," Cooper said. "Forever." They stood in the middle of the room, holding each other as the rain continued to fall outside. And for the first time since Thomas had ridden away with the cavalry, Juliana felt completely whole. The weeks that followed were filled with work and laughter and the slow building of a life together. Cooper proved himself to be more than just a skilled laborer. He was a thoughtful partner, always asking Juliana's opinion before making decisions, always treating her as an equal in the running of the homestead. Together, they finished the garden fence and planted more crops. Together, they repaired the irrigation system that fed water from the creek to the fields. Together, they worked on the house, making it not just functional but beautiful, adding small touches that transformed it from a survival shelter into a home. Word spread through the area that Juliana Zimmerman had a man working her place, and the reactions were mixed. Some of the neighboring homesteaders, good people struggling with their own challenges, stopped by to welcome Cooper and offer congratulations on the improvements to the property. Others, including Bart Henderson, made their disapproval known through cold stares in town and subtle attempts at intimidation. Cooper handled it all with calm confidence. When Henderson rode by the property one day and made a pointed comment about men who lived off women, Cooper had simply looked him in the eye and said, "I am building a life with someone I love. If you have got a problem with that, you are welcome to say so direct instead of dancing around it." Henderson had ridden off without another word, and he had not come back. As spring turned into summer, Juliana and Cooper settled into an easy partnership that felt as natural as breathing. They worked together during the day, building and planting and tending to the animals. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and made plans for the future. They would get married, of course, but they decided to wait until fall when the harvest was in, and they had time to do it properly. They would expand the cattle operation, buying a small herd to graze on the good grass that covered their land. They would maybe build an addition onto the house eventually, because Cooper wanted children and Juliana found she wanted them too, wanted to fill this place with life and laughter and the sound of young voices. One evening in early July, as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Cooper took something from his pocket and held it out to Juliana. "I know we are waiting for a proper wedding," he said, "but I want you to have this now." Juliana looked down at the ring in his palm. It was simple silver, handcrafted with obvious care, and etched into the band was a pattern that looked like fence rails intertwined. "Did you make this?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "I did," Cooper said. "While you were sleeping, late at night when I could not stop thinking about you. I know it is not fancy, but I wanted you to have something that came from my hands and my heart." Juliana took the ring and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," she said, "and I will wear it every day for the rest of my life." Cooper pulled her close and kissed her, and they sat there as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and the first stars began to emerge. Two people who had found in each other something worth holding on to. But peace in the frontier was always fragile, and trouble arrived on a hot afternoon in late July in the form of three rough-looking men who rode into the yard while Cooper was out checking the fence line. Juliana was in the garden, and she recognized one of the men immediately as the ranch hand who had ridden with Henderson, the one with the speculative eyes and the cruel mouth. "Afternoon, Mrs. Zimmerman," the man said, and his tone made her skin crawl. "Or I guess it is still Mrs. Zimmerman, is it not? Heard you have got yourself a man living here, but I do not see a wedding ring on his finger." Juliana straightened from the garden, her hand instinctively going to the knife she kept at her belt for cutting vegetables. "You need to leave," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "Right now." The three men exchanged glances and then dismounted. "Thing is," the spokesman said, "Mr. Henderson sent us with a message. He is tired of waiting for you to see reason. He is making one final offer, $500 for your land, which is more than generous considering you cannot work it proper." "I said no the last time, and my answer has not changed," Juliana said. "Now get off my property." "See, that is the problem," the man said, moving closer. "You think you can just tell men what to do because you have got some drifter warming your bed, but that does not change what you are, which is a woman alone who does not belong out here." Juliana pulled the knife from her belt and held it steady. "I am warning you," she said. "Leave now, or I will defend myself." The man laughed, an ugly sound. "You going to stab all three of us, little lady? I do not think so." They advanced on her, and Juliana backed toward the house, keeping the knife in front of her, her mind racing through her options. She could scream for Cooper, but he was too far away to hear. She could run for the house and try to bar the door, but they would likely catch her before she made it. She could fight, but 3 against 1 were terrible odds no matter how determined she was. But she never had to choose, because Cooper appeared from around the barn on his horse, moving fast. He covered the distance in seconds and swung down from the saddle with a rifle in his hands. "Step away from her," he said, and his voice was colder than Juliana had ever heard it. The 3 men froze, then slowly turned to face him. "This is not your fight, Steele," the spokesman said. "This is between Henderson and the lady." "Anything involving Juliana is my fight," Cooper said. "And you boys are going to mount up and ride out of here right now, or I am going to start shooting. I am partial to kneecaps, but I will take what targets present themselves." For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Then the second man, who had not spoken yet, said, "Henderson is not going to like this." "Then Henderson can come talk to me himself instead of sending you to intimidate a woman," Cooper said. "Now ride." The 3 men mounted slowly, making a show of not being scared, but Juliana could see the calculation in their eyes. 3 men against 1 were good odds, but not when the one man held a rifle and clearly knew how to use it. They turned their horses and rode away, and Juliana heard one of them call back, "Henderson will hear about this." "I am counting on it," Cooper called after them. He waited until they were out of sight before lowering the rifle and turning to Juliana. "Are you hurt?" Juliana shook her head, but now that the danger had passed, she found she was shaking. "They were going to hurt me," she said. "Force me to sign something, maybe worse." Cooper pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while she trembled against him. "I am so sorry," he said. "I should not have left you alone. I should have known Henderson would try something like this." "You could not have known," Juliana said. "And you came back in time. That is what matters." But Cooper pulled away and looked down at her with something hard and determined in his face. "We are getting married," he said. "Tomorrow. Today, if we can find someone to do it, I will not have you vulnerable like this anymore. As my wife, you will have protection under the law. Henderson will have to go through me to get to you or this land, and I promise you, Juliana, I will not let that happen." Juliana wanted to argue that they should stick to their plans, that they should wait for fall and do things properly. But looking into Cooper's face, seeing the fear that still lingered there beneath the anger, she realized he was right. This was not about romance or tradition. This was about survival and protection and claiming what was theirs in a way that the law would recognize. "All right," she said. "Tomorrow. We will go into town and find a preacher and get married. And then we will come back here and build our life together, and Henderson be damned." Cooper kissed her hard, a claiming and a promise, and Juliana kissed him back with equal fervor. They stood in the yard, holding each other as the sun beat down and the wind moved through the grass, and they made silent vows that would be spoken aloud tomorrow, but that already lived in their hearts. The next morning, they rode into Ordway together. It was a small town, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, and a few other businesses scattered along the dusty road. The church was a simple white building at the far end of town, and the preacher was a thin man named Reverend Matthews who looked at them with kind eyes and asked no prying questions. "We want to be married," Cooper said simply. "Today, if possible." Reverend Matthews studied them for a moment, then nodded. "I will need a couple of witnesses," he said, "and you will need a license from the county clerk. That is over in the next town, about 15 miles east. We can get the license later," Cooper said. "Right now, we just need the ceremony. We will do the paperwork after." The Reverend hesitated, then seemed to see something in their faces that convinced him. "All right," he said. "Let me round up some witnesses. Give me 10 minutes. They waited outside the church, holding hands and not speaking much. Juliana looked down at the simple dress she wore, the same dress she had worn to work in the garden this morning, and felt a pang that this was not the wedding she had imagined. But then she looked at Cooper, solid and steady beside her, and realized that the trappings did not matter. What mattered was the man and the promise and the life they were choosing to build together. Reverend Matthews returned with 2 witnesses, an elderly woman who ran the boarding house and the blacksmith, a burly man with gentle hands. They gathered in the simple church, sunlight streaming through the plain glass windows, and Reverend Matthews opened his Bible. The ceremony was brief and beautiful in its simplicity. Cooper spoke his vows in a clear, steady voice, promising to love and honor and cherish Juliana all the days of his life. Juliana spoke hers with tears in her eyes, promising the same. When Cooper slipped a braided grass ring onto her finger to supplement the silver one he had already given her, she laughed through her tears at the sweetness of it. "I pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Matthews said. "Mr. Steele, you may kiss your bride." And Cooper did, thoroughly and tenderly, while the witnesses clapped and Juliana felt her heart swell with joy and relief, and love so intense it almost hurt. They rode back to the homestead as husband and wife, and that night they made love in the house that was now truly theirs together. Cooper was gentle and patient, taking his time to show Juliana with his hands and mouth and body how much he loved her. And Juliana, who had thought she might never want this kind of intimacy again after losing Thomas, found that with Cooper it felt right and good and like coming home. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, talking softly about their plans for the future. "We will need to get that license," Cooper said, stroking her hair. "Make everything legal and proper." "We will," Juliana agreed. "But for now, I just want to be here with you and remember this moment." Cooper kissed her temple. "I will give you 1,000 moments like this," he promised. "A lifetime of them." True to Cooper's prediction, Henderson did hear about what had happened, and he did not take it well. 2 days after the wedding, he appeared at the homestead with 6 armed men, riding up to the house like a small army. But Cooper was ready. He stood on the porch with his rifle in plain sight, and Juliana stood beside him with hers, presenting a united front. "Heard you got yourself married, Steele," Henderson called from his horse. "Convenient timing." "Convenient nothing," Cooper said. "I married Juliana because I love her and because this is our land now, legally and properly, so whatever plans you had, you can forget them." Henderson's face darkened. "You are making a mistake," he said. "Both of you. This land should be part of the Rockingham, and one way or another it will be. You threaten us again, and I will ride into town and file a formal complaint with the sheriff," Cooper said. "I imagine he would be real interested to hear about how you have been intimidating widows and sending men to rough up women alone on their property. That is the kind of thing that gets attention, even out here." For a long moment, Henderson just stared at them, his jaw working like he was chewing on words too bitter to spit out. Then he turned his horse and gestured to his men. "This is not over," he said as he rode away, but it was. Oh, Henderson tried a few more times over the following months to make trouble. He complained to the sheriff about property lines that were not in dispute. He spread rumors in town about Cooper's character. He even tried to get the bank to refuse them credit when they went to buy cattle. But none of it worked. Cooper and Juliana stood firm together, and slowly the community began to see them not as a drifter and a widow, but as a hard-working couple making a go of it in hard country. People respected that, even if men like Henderson did not. As summer faded into fall, the homestead thrived. The garden produced more vegetables than Juliana had dared hope for, and she spent weeks canning and preserving for the winter ahead. The small herd of cattle they had purchased grazed contentedly on the good grass, and Cooper proved to have a knack for animal husbandry that served them well. The house stood strong and weather-tight, and the fence that had started everything held firm against wind and weather and wandering livestock. In October, they made the trip to the county seat and obtained their official marriage license, making their union legal in the eyes of the law as well as the eyes of God. They celebrated by having dinner at the only restaurant in town, a small place that served decent steak and passable pie, and then they rode home under a full moon, talking about the baby Juliana suspected she might be carrying. "Are you sure?" Cooper asked, and she could hear the wonder and joy in his voice. "Not completely," Juliana admitted, "but I think so. I have missed my courses 2 months now, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings." Cooper reined in his horse and reached over to take her hand. "A baby," he said softly. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Juliana asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy," Cooper laughed, the sound full of unrestrained delight. "Juliana, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and grateful and about a dozen other things I do not have words for. We are going to have a family. A real family." They sat there on horseback in the moonlight, holding hands and grinning at each other like fools, and Juliana felt her heart overflow with happiness. She had thought her life was over when that letter arrived telling her Thomas was dead. She had thought she would spend the rest of her days just surviving, just getting by. But then a cowboy had ridden up to fix her broken fence, and everything had changed. Winter came, and it was hard as winters in Colorado always were, but they faced it together. They had laid in supplies and firewood, and the house stayed warm and dry. The cattle survived on the hay they had put up during the summer, and Cooper proved adept at managing the herd through the cold months. Juliana's pregnancy progressed, and Cooper treated her like she was made of glass, constantly trying to take over her chores and fussing over her until she had to laugh and tell him she was not an invalid. "I know," Cooper said, wrapping his arms around her growing belly. "But you are carrying our child, and that makes you precious beyond measure. Let me fuss a little." "A little is fine," Juliana said, leaning back against him. "But I am still going to do my work. I will go crazy if I just sit around waiting for this baby to arrive." In late March, as the snow was beginning to melt and the first signs of spring were appearing on the prairie, Juliana went into labor. Cooper had ridden into Ordway 3 days earlier to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Anderson, who had delivered half the babies in the county. She had been staying in the barn, waiting for the baby to come, and when Juliana woke Cooper in the middle of the night with a gasp of pain, Mrs. Anderson took charge immediately. The labor was long and difficult, And there were moments when Cooper, pacing in the main room while Mrs. Anderson worked in the bedroom, thought he might go mad with worry. But finally, as dawn was breaking and painting the sky pink and gold, he heard the most beautiful sound in the world, his baby crying. Mrs. Anderson emerged from the bedroom, smiling and tired. "You have a son," she said, "and your wife is asking for you." Cooper rushed into the bedroom and found Juliana propped up against the pillows, exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Come meet your son," she said. Cooper approached the bed like he was walking on sacred ground. He looked down at the tiny red face of his child, at the miniature hands that were already curling into fists, and felt something in his chest crack wide open. "He is perfect," Cooper whispered. "You are both perfect." "We are calling him William," Juliana said. "William Thomas Steele, after my father and after the man who brought me to this place." Cooper looked at her with surprise and gratitude. "You want to name him after your first husband? Thomas brought me here," Juliana said. "He gave me the chance at this life, even if he could not share it with me. I will not forget that or dishonor his memory. But this child is ours, Cooper, yours and mine, and he will grow up knowing he is loved and wanted and part of something good." Cooper leaned down and kissed his wife, then gently stroked his son's soft cheek. "Hello, William," he said. "Welcome to the world, little man. We are going to take good care of you." The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. William proved to be a healthy baby with strong lungs, and his mother's stubborn temperament. Cooper was a devoted father, walking the floor with his son when he cried at night, helping with feedings and diaper changes, talking to the baby in a soft, continuous stream about everything from cattle to weather to the dreams he had for his son's future. As spring turned into summer and William grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, alert infant, life on the homestead settled into a rhythm of work and family and contentment. They added to their cattle herd and built a better barn. They expanded the garden and planted an orchard of young fruit trees that would take years to bear, but that represented their commitment to this place and this future. They made friends in the community, people who came to appreciate Cooper's honesty and skill and Juliana's determination and kindness. Bart Henderson eventually gave up his attempts to acquire their land. Some said it was because he realized they would never sell. Others said it was because his own ranch ran into financial trouble when a drought hit the following summer. But whatever the reason, he left them alone, and that was all they asked for. 2 years after William was born, Juliana found herself pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, having been through it before, and Cooper was less frantic, though no less devoted. Their second child arrived in the spring of 1871, a daughter they named Grace Caroline, who had her father's eyes and her mother's smile. By the time 1875 rolled around, the Steele family had become an established part of the Ordway community. Cooper served on the town council, helping to make decisions about water rights and grazing land, and the new school they were building. Juliana taught other women about gardening and canning, sharing the knowledge she had gained through hard experience. Their ranch, while not large, was productive and well managed, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they worked together toward a common goal. They had added a third child by then, another son they named James Robert, who was born in the winter of 1874. The house had been expanded to accommodate the growing family, with an addition that included 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The barn had been rebuilt entirely, and they now ran a herd of 40 cattle along with chickens and pigs and 3 horses. It was not a wealthy life by any means, but it was a good life, filled with honest work and genuine love. On a warm evening in May 1876, Cooper and Juliana sat on the porch watching their 3 children play in the yard. William, now 5, was showing his 3-year-old sister how to identify different plants, the same plants Juliana had taught him about. Grace listened with rapt attention, her small face serious with concentration. James, nearly 2, toddled around chasing butterflies with the single-minded determination that characterized his young life. "You ever think about how it all started?" Juliana asked, leaning her head on Cooper's shoulder. "That day you rode up and saw me trying to fix that fence." "I think about it all the time," Cooper said, wrapping his arm around her. "I think about how close I came to just riding past, about how I almost talked myself out of stopping because it was not my business. And then I think about everything I would have missed if I had made that choice." "I think about it too," Juliana said. "I think about how lost I was, how close I came to giving up. And then you appeared like some kind of answer to a prayer I did not even know I was praying." "We saved each other," Cooper said simply. "That is what I think happened. You saved me from a life of drifting and running and never putting down roots. I saved you from loneliness and fear and the weight of trying to do everything alone. We saved each other, and then we built this life together." Juliana turned her head to kiss him, a soft, lingering kiss that tasted of coffee and contentment. "I love you," she said. "I love the life we have made. I love our children and this land and everything we have become together." "I love you too," Cooper said. "More now than I did 9 years ago when I first saw you, which I would not have thought possible. You are my heart, Juliana. You and these children. You are everything." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set and the prairie turned gold and then purple in the fading light. William called out something about finding a ladybug, and Grace squealed with delight, and James tumbled over his own feet and got up laughing. These were the sounds of home, the sounds of family, the sounds of a life well lived. That night, after the children were tucked into their beds and the house was quiet, Cooper and Juliana lay together in the dark, holding each other close. "Do you ever regret it?" Cooper asked softly. "Choosing this life, choosing me? I know it has been hard sometimes." Juliana propped herself up on one elbow and looked down at her husband's face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "I have never regretted choosing you," she said firmly. "Not once, not ever. Yes, it has been hard. This land is hard, and the work is hard, and there have been times when I thought we might not make it. But I would choose this life and this struggle, and you 1,000 times over any easier path without you." Cooper pulled her down for a kiss that spoke of love and desire and the comfort of long familiarity. "We have built something good here," he said when they finally broke apart. "Something that will last." "We have," Juliana agreed. "And we will keep building it together, for as long as we both shall live." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. There was the drought of 1877 that tested their water resources and their patience. There was the harsh winter of 1879 that killed several head of cattle but left their family intact. There were illnesses and injuries, good years and bad years, moments of doubt and moments of triumph. Through it all, Cooper and Juliana stood together, facing whatever came with the same partnership and determination that had defined their relationship from the start. They watched their children grow and thrive, watched William become a serious boy who loved books and learning, watched Grace develop a talent for music and a stubborn independence that reminded them both of her mother, watched James grow into a rough and tumble child who wanted to do everything his father did. By 1880, the homestead had expanded significantly. They had purchased the adjacent property when the owner decided to move back east, giving them control of a much larger piece of land and access to even more water resources. Cooper had proven himself not just as a rancher, but as a leader in the community, someone people turned to for advice and guidance. Juliana had become known for her skills with both animals and plants, and women came from miles around to learn from her about everything from treating sick livestock to making medicines from herbs. On their 10th anniversary, Cooper surprised Juliana by taking her to Denver for a week, leaving the children in the capable care of Mrs. Anderson and her husband. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch and the children since William was born, and at first, Juliana felt anxious about leaving. But as they walked the streets of the growing city, as they ate in restaurants and stayed in a hotel, and simply enjoyed being together without the constant demands of work and family, she remembered what it felt like to be just a woman with the man she loved. "Thank you for this," she said as they sat in their hotel room on the last night, looking out at the lights of the city. "For remembering that we are more than just parents and ranchers, that we are still Cooper and Juliana, the two people who fell in love over a broken fence." "I will never forget that," Cooper said, pulling her onto his lap. "No matter how busy we get or how much responsibility we have, I will always remember that you are the woman who gave me a reason to stop running, and I will always love you with everything I have." They returned home renewed and refreshed, ready to face whatever the future held. The children had survived their absence without trauma, though William reported seriously that James had cried for Mama every night, and Grace proudly showed off the songs she had learned from Mrs. Anderson. The ranch had continued to function smoothly in their absence, proof that they had built something solid and sustainable. As the 1880s progressed, Cooper and Juliana continued to build their legacy. They added a fourth child in 1882, another daughter they named Sarah Elizabeth, who arrived with a shock of black hair and a piercing cry that suggested she would not be easily ignored. The older children adored their baby sister, and the house rang with the sounds of family life, arguments and laughter, and the constant noise of young people growing up. They also continued to improve the ranch, adding better fencing and a proper irrigation system that protected them against drought. They bred their cattle carefully, improving the quality of their herd. They planted windbreaks of trees to protect the house and barn from the fierce prairie winds. Every decision they made was made together, with full discussion and mutual agreement, the way it had been from the start. People in town spoke of the Steeles with respect and admiration. They were seen as an example of what could be achieved through hard work and partnership, proof that even people who started with nothing could build something lasting if they were willing to put in the effort. Young couples came to them for advice about homesteading and marriage, and Cooper and Juliana always tried to share what they had learned, though they were careful to emphasize that every path was different and what worked for them might not work for others. In the summer of 1885, tragedy struck when Mrs. Anderson, who had become a dear friend over the years, passed away suddenly from a heart ailment. Juliana wept at the funeral, remembering the woman who had delivered all four of her children, who had offered wisdom and support and friendship during some of the hardest times. Cooper held her as she cried and then helped her organize meals for the bereaved family, because that was what you did in a community like theirs. You showed up for each other in hard times as well as good. That same year, William turned 14 and announced that he wanted to go to the new high school being built in the county seat. It would mean living away from home during the week, coming back only on weekends, and the decision was agonizing for Juliana. But Cooper gently reminded her that they had always wanted their children to have opportunities they had not had, and education was one of those opportunities. So they let William go, and they watched their eldest child begin to forge his own path in the world. Grace, at 12, was developing into a beautiful and headstrong young woman who loved the ranch but also dreamed of seeing more of the world. James, at 10, was his father's shadow, learning everything he could about cattle and horses and the land. And Sarah, at 3, was a whirlwind of energy and curiosity who kept them all on their toes. On a cool evening in October 1886, as the leaves on their fruit trees turned gold and red, Cooper and Juliana celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary. The children had prepared a special supper with help from neighbors, and after the meal, they all gathered in the expanded living room that now featured a piano Grace had been learning to play. As Grace played a simple melody and the younger children sang along, Cooper pulled Juliana aside onto the porch where they could watch through the window and also speak privately. 15 years, he said, shaking his head in wonder. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I rode up and saw you trying to fix that fence. Other times it feels like I have known you forever. Both are true, Juliana said, lacing her fingers through his. We have lived lifetimes in these 15 years. We have built a home and a family and a future. We have survived drought and illness and people who tried to take what was ours. We have raised 4 children and built a ranch that will last for generations. That is a lifetime of achievement in just 15 years. And I would not change a moment of it, Cooper said. Even the hard times, even the times I thought we might not make it. Because all of it brought us here to this moment, with our children singing in our house and our land stretching out around us, and a future full of possibility ahead. Juliana leaned her head on his shoulder, listening to the music drifting from inside. Do you remember what you said to me that first night at supper, when you told me about your brother and why you had been drifting? I said I was looking for a reason to stop running, Cooper said. That I wanted to find something worth staying for. You found it, Juliana said softly. You found me and I found you, and together we found this life. And it is beautiful, Cooper. Hard sometimes, but beautiful. It is, Cooper agreed. And it will keep being beautiful as long as we have each other. They stood on the porch, holding each other and listening to their children, and they felt the deep satisfaction of people who had built something good and lasting out of nothing but determination and love. The years continued to roll by, each one adding new layers to the life they had built. William graduated from high school and decided to become a teacher, a choice that surprised some but delighted his parents. Grace continued to dream of travel, but also showed a remarkable talent for managing the ranch finances, taking over the accounts when she turned 16, and proving to have a head for numbers that rivaled her father's instinct for cattle. James took to ranching like he had been born to it, and by the time he was 15, he could work alongside his father as an equal partner. Sarah grew into a quiet, thoughtful child who loved reading and spent hours with her brother William when he came home, asking him questions about everything he was learning. In 1890, Cooper and Juliana attended William's graduation from the teaching college. At 19, their eldest son stood tall and proud, and Juliana cried happy tears as he received his certificate. That night, William told them he had been offered a position at a school in Montana, and while it meant he would be far from home, he wanted to take it. Go, Cooper said, gripping his son's shoulder. Go and build your own life. Your mother and I built ours from nothing, and we want you to have the chance to do the same. Just remember where you come from and what you were taught, and you will do fine. William hugged them both, and Juliana held her son close, breathing in his familiar scent and trying to memorize the feel of his arms around her. We are so proud of you, she whispered. So very proud. 2 years later, Grace announced she was engaged to a young rancher from the next county, a good man named Peter Colby who treated her with respect and adoration. The wedding was held at the ranch, with half the county in attendance, and Juliana watched her daughter marry with mixed emotions. Joy that Grace had found love. Sadness that another child was leaving the nest. Hope that Grace and Peter would build a life as rich and full as the one she and Cooper had built. James showed no interest in leaving. At 17, he made it clear that his future was on the ranch, working alongside his father and eventually taking over when Cooper decided to step back. "This is my home," he said simply. "Why would I want to be anywhere else?" Sarah, at 12, was still finding her way, but Juliana saw hints of herself in the girl's determination and Cooper's patience in the way she approached problems. Whatever path Sarah chose, Juliana knew she would walk it with confidence. By 1895, the Steele Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region. They ran over 200 head of cattle and had diversified into horses as well, breeding working stock that were known for their intelligence and stamina. The house had been expanded twice more and now featured 6 bedrooms, a large kitchen, a dining room that could seat 20, and a parlor with the piano Grace had learned on, and a collection of books that would have impressed any scholar. The barn complex included multiple structures, and they employed 2 full-time ranch hands to help with the constant work. Cooper, now in his early 50s, still worked as hard as men half his age, though Juliana noticed the gray in his hair and the lines around his eyes that spoke of a lifetime spent in the sun. He was still strong and vital, still the man who had ridden up to fix her fence all those years ago, but now there was a settledness to him, a contentment that came from knowing he had built something that would outlast him. Juliana, at 48, had her own gray hairs and lines, earned through labor and worry and joy in equal measure. She still worked the garden every spring and summer. She still canned and preserved, though now she had Sarah's help. She still managed the household and served as the unofficial midwife and healer for the surrounding area. Her hands were scarred and calloused, her back sometimes ached, but she had never felt more herself than she did on this land with this man and the life they had created. On a warm June evening in 1896, the family gathered for Sunday supper, a tradition they had maintained even as the children grew and started their own lives. William had come home from Montana with his new wife, a teacher named Margaret who fit into the family with easy grace. Grace and Peter were there with their 1-year-old son Thomas, named in honor of Juliana's first husband, a gesture that had moved her to tears. James was there with his sweetheart Anna, a neighboring rancher's daughter he would marry in the fall. And Sarah, now 14, was there with all her questions and observations and youthful energy. As they sat around the expanded dining table, passing dishes and sharing stories and laughing at James's jokes, Cooper caught Juliana's eye across the table and smiled. It was a smile of pure happiness, of a man who had everything he had ever wanted. Juliana smiled back, feeling her heart swell with love for this man and this family and this life they had built together. After supper, as the sun was setting and painting the Colorado sky in its nightly show of color, Cooper and Juliana walked out to the fence line, the fence he had built 29 years ago, the fence that had started everything. Parts of it had been replaced over the years, but the core structure was still there, still strong, still holding. "You remember the first time I kissed you?" Cooper asked, running his hand along the top rail. "It was right here after that rainstorm." "I remember," Juliana said, moving to stand beside him. "I thought my heart was going to beat right out of my chest. I had not felt anything like that since I was a girl courting Thomas." "And now?" Cooper asked, pulling her close. Now I feel it every time I look at you, Juliana said honestly. Every single time. You are the love of my life, Cooper Steele, the great love, the kind they write stories about. Cooper kissed her, and it was sweet and familiar and still contained the spark that had ignited all those years ago. And you are mine, he said. My reason for stopping. My reason for staying. My reason for everything. They stood by the fence as the stars began to emerge, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. They thought about the journey that had brought them here, about all the moments of choice and chance that had led to this place. This time, this perfect expression of what two people could create when they chose to build together. In the distance, they could hear their children and grandchild playing in the yard, hear the cattle lowing in the fields, hear the wind moving through the grass and the trees they had planted. These were the sounds of home, the sounds of a life well lived, the sounds of love made manifest in the world. Thank you, Juliana said suddenly. Cooper looked down at her. For what? For stopping that day, Juliana said. For seeing a woman who needed help and offering it without asking for anything in return. For staying when you could have gone. For loving me when I thought I could never love again. For building this life with me. For everything. Cooper held her closer, his voice thick with emotion when he spoke. I am the one who should be thanking you. You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me a family when I thought I would always be alone. You gave me a reason to be better than I was. You gave me everything, Juliana. Everything that matters. They turned and walked back to the house together, hand in hand. Their steps matched after nearly 3 decades of walking the same path. Behind them, the fence stood strong and straight, a monument to the day a cowboy had ridden up and fixed more than just broken wood. He had fixed a broken woman and a broken life, and in doing so had fixed himself. Inside the house, the family was gathered in the parlor. Sarah was playing the piano while William's wife Margaret sang. Grace was nursing little Thomas while Peter stood behind her chair with his hand on her shoulder. James and Anna were sitting close together on the sofa, their fingers intertwined. It was a scene of domestic harmony, of love expressed in 1,000 small ways, of a family bound together by blood and choice, and the enduring power of commitment. Cooper and Juliana stood in the doorway, taking it all in, and they knew that whatever happened in the years to come, whatever challenges or joys awaited them, they would face it all together. Because that was what they had always done. From that first day when the army had left, and her husband had never come back, when a cowboy had ridden up and fixed her broken fence, they had faced everything together. And they would continue to do so until the end of their days. Two souls intertwined, two hearts beating as one, two people who had found in each other the home they had always been searching for. That night, as they lay in bed with the window open to let in the cool night air, Cooper whispered, I love you, Juliana Steele. I will love you until I draw my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Cooper Steele, Juliana whispered back, in this life and whatever comes after. You are my heart. You are my home. You are my everything. They fell asleep in each other's arms, surrounded by the life they had built, secure in the knowledge that they had done what so few people manage to do. They had taken broken pieces and made something whole. They had taken loneliness and transformed it into love. They had taken a broken fence and built a legacy that would last for generations. And somewhere in the darkness, the land itself seemed to breathe a sigh of contentment, blessed by the presence of two people who had loved it and each other with everything they had. The fence stood guard through the night, strong and true, a testament to the day everything changed, the day a widow's prayer was answered by the sound of hoofbeats, The day a cowboy decided to stop running and found the only home he would ever need. This was their story, the story of Cooper and Juliana Steele, and it was a love story for the ages, simple and profound, hard-won and deeply cherished, a testament to the enduring power of love to heal and transform and create beauty, even in the harsh reality of the frontier. They had built their happily ever after one day at a time, one fence post at a time, one choice at a time, and it was perfect in all its imperfect glory. Their love had conquered loneliness and loss, had overcome obstacles and adversity, and had emerged stronger and more beautiful for the challenges it had faced. And in the end, that was all that mattered. They had loved each other well, raised their family with care and wisdom, built something that would endure, and lived their lives with purpose and joy. It was enough. It was everything. It was the happy ending they both deserved and had worked so hard to achieve, and it would continue long into the future, carried forward by their children and their children's children. A legacy of love that began the day the army left and her husband never came back, and a cowboy rode up and fixed her broken fence.